January 19th, 1943, HMS Vernon, Portsmouth, England. Geoffrey Pike knelt in the snow, his gloved hands shaping a block of frozen seawater. The winter wind cut through his woolen uniform, but he paid it no mind. He was focused on the chunk of ice in front of him. With a small knife, he carved a rough outline of a ship's hull. This was no child's play. It was the first step in a project that could change the course of the war. Pike stood, brushing snow from his knees. He held up the ice model for the officers nearby to see. "This," he said, "is how we'll beat the U-boats." The officers stared. Some frowned. Others shook their heads. The idea seemed absurd. An aircraft carrier made of ice? It defied every rule of naval engineering. But Pike was used to skepticism. He was a scientist, not a sailor. His mind worked in ways that others found hard to follow. By 1943, Britain was in crisis. German U-boats were sinking Allied merchant ships at an alarming rate. The Battle of the Atlantic was being lost. The Royal Navy needed more aircraft carriers to protect convoys, but steel was scarce. Shipyards were backlogged with orders for destroyers and frigates. Building a traditional carrier would take years, time Britain didn't have. Pike's ice carrier was a desperate gamble, a way to build a warship quickly, using a resource that was endless: seawater. Pike had first conceived of the idea in 1942. He was working for Combined Operations Headquarters, a unit tasked with developing unconventional weapons. One night, he'd read a report about Arctic expeditions. It mentioned that ice could be strengthened with certain additives. Pike's mind raced. If ice could be made strong enough, it could replace steel. An ice carrier would be cheap to build. It could be constructed in months, not years. It could sail into the North Atlantic, where U-boats lurked, and launch fighter planes to protect convoys. The more he thought about it, the more sense it made. He named the project Habakkuk, after the biblical prophet who asked, "How long shall I cry, and thou wilt not hear?" For Pike, the name symbolized Britain's plea for a solution to the U-boat menace. The first step was proving that ice could be made strong enough. Pike collaborated with Thomas Arkell Clark, a professor of chemistry at the University of Toronto. Clark had been researching ways to reinforce ice for Arctic construction. Together, they discovered that mixing ice with pulp created a material far stronger than pure ice. They called it Picrete, a combination of Pike's name and concrete. Tests showed that Picrete could withstand pressure of up to 2,000 pounds per square inch. It was stronger than concrete. It was also bulletproof. A .303 rifle round bounced off a Picrete block without leaving a mark. Best of all, Picrete melted at a much slower rate than pure ice. At room temperature, it took months to dissolve. In the frigid North Atlantic, it would last for years. Pike and Clark presented their findings to the British Admiralty in March 1943. The meeting was tense. Senior officers questioned every detail. How would the carrier be built? How would it be propelled? How would it withstand enemy fire? Pike had answers for everything. The carrier would be 600 feet long, 150 feet wide, and 30 feet tall. It would displace 1.8 million tons, making it the largest ship ever built. It would have a hull made of Picrete, reinforced with steel ribs for extra strength. The deck would be covered in a layer of asphalt to prevent aircraft from slipping. The carrier would be powered by 2 diesel engines, borrowed from a battleship, and could reach a speed of 10 knots. It would carry 20 fighter planes and 10 bombers. It would even have a small hospital and living quarters for the 400-man crew. The Admiralty was skeptical, but they had no better options. They authorized a small-scale test. In May 1943, construction began on a prototype in Patricia Lake, Alberta, Canada. The lake was chosen for its cold climate and calm waters. The prototype was 60 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 10 feet tall, 1/10 the size of the planned carrier. Workers cut blocks of ice from the lake and mixed them with wood pulp. They used steam shovels to stack the picrete blocks into the shape of a hull. Steel ribs were added to reinforce the structure. The work was grueling. Temperatures dropped to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Workers' faces froze. Their gloves stuck to the ice. But by July 1943, the prototype was complete. It was a crude structure, but it floated. It withstood waves and wind. It even survived a test where a small explosive was detonated nearby. The picrete held. The test was a success. News of the prototype reached Winston Churchill. The Prime Minister was intrigued. He had a reputation for supporting unconventional ideas, like the bouncing bomb and the Mulberry Harbors. Churchill ordered the Admiralty to proceed with the full-scale carrier. "If this works," he said, "it will be one of the greatest inventions of the war." But not everyone was on board. The Royal Navy's Chief of the Naval Staff, Admiral Sir Dudley Pound, was openly hostile. He called the project a waste of time and resources. He argued that the carrier would be too slow, too vulnerable to air attack, and too difficult to maintain. But Churchill overruled him. Work on Habakkuk began in September 1943. The construction site chosen was a remote bay in Newfoundland. It was cold enough to keep the picrete frozen year-round. It was also far from German U-boats and bombers. The first step was building a massive wooden frame. It would serve as a mold for the picrete hull. Workers cut down trees from the surrounding forests. They hauled the logs to the bay using horses and tractors. The frame took 3 months to build. It was 600 feet long, 150 feet wide, and 30 feet tall. It looked like a giant wooden box floating in the water. Next came the picrete. Workers pumped seawater into large tanks. They added wood pulp, 10% of the mixture by weight. The mixture was stirred constantly to ensure the wood pulp was evenly distributed. Then, the mixture was poured into the wooden frame. In the cold Newfoundland air, it froze solid within hours. The work was slow and dangerous. Workers fell into the icy water. Some suffered from frostbite. Others contracted pneumonia. But progress was made. By January 1944, the hull was half complete. The picrete was 12 feet thick in some places. It was so strong that a bulldozer could drive on top of it without leaving a trace. The next step was installing the engines. 2 12,000 horsepower diesel engines were shipped from Britain. They were lifted into place using cranes. The engines were connected propellers that were 20 feet in diameter. The installation took a month. When the engines were tested for the first time, the carrier moved. It was slow, just 10 knots, but it moved. The crew cheered. Pike, who was on site, smiled. "We've done it," he said. "We've built a ship of ice." But problems soon emerged. The first was weight. The carrier was heavier than expected. The picrete hull weighed 1.2 million tons. The engines, weapons, and aircraft added another 600,000 tons. The total displacement was 1.8 million tons, more than 3 times that of the battleship HMS Nelson. The weight put strain on the wooden frame. Some of the beams began to crack. Workers had to add more steel supports to keep the frame from collapsing. The second problem was insulation. The carrier's interior was too cold. The crew's living quarters were at 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Pipes froze. Food turned to ice. Workers had to install heating systems, oil-fired furnaces that pumped hot air through ducts in the pykrete. But the furnaces use a lot of fuel. The carrier's range was reduced from 6,000 miles to 4,000 miles. It was still enough to reach the North Atlantic, but it was a setback. The third problem was the deck. The asphalt covering was supposed to prevent aircraft from slipping, but in freezing temperatures, the asphalt became brittle. It cracked under the weight of the planes. Workers had to replace it with a layer of rubber. The rubber worked, but it added more weight. The carrier's speed dropped to 9 knots. It was now slower than most convoys. The Royal Navy began to worry. A slow carrier would be an easy target for U-boats. It would also struggle to keep up with the ships it was supposed to protect. But Pike argued that the carrier's strengths outweighed its weaknesses. It could carry more aircraft than any other carrier in the Royal Navy. It could withstand more damage. It was also cheap, costing just £1 million, compared to £10 million for a steel carrier. The Admiralty agreed to continue the project. By April 1944, the carrier was 80% complete. The deck was finished. The engines were working. The weapons, 4 4.5-inch anti-aircraft guns and 8 20mm flak guns, were installed. The aircraft hangar was built. It could hold 30 planes. The crew quarters were ready. The carrier was named HMS Habakkuk. It was scheduled to sail for Britain in June 1944, just in time for the D-Day landings. But then disaster struck. A German spy plane spotted a construction site. The Germans didn't know what the structure was. They thought it was a new type of fortification, but they sent a U-boat to investigate. On May 12, 1944, U-977 arrived in the bay. It fired 2 torpedoes at the Habakkuk. The first torpedo hit the hull. There was a loud explosion. The pykrete cracked. Water poured into the hull. The second torpedo hit the engine room. The engine stopped. The Habakkuk began to sink. Workers and crew members scrambled to escape. Some jumped into the icy water. Others climbed into lifeboats. Pike was on board at the time. He was in the command center when the first torpedo hit. He rushed to the deck. He watched as the carrier listed to starboard. "We're going down," he said to no one in particular. He climbed into a lifeboat. The Habakkuk sank in 30 minutes. It settled on the bottom of the bay, 200 feet below the surface. The U-boat escaped. The loss was a devastating blow. The Admiralty held an inquiry. They blamed the spy plane and the U-boat, but many officers blamed Pike. They said the carrier was too slow, too vulnerable, and too impractical. Churchill was disappointed. He ordered the project canceled. Habakkuk was a good idea, he said, but it was ahead of its time. Pike was devastated. He had poured 2 years of his life into the project. He tried to convince the Admiralty to build another carrier. He argued that the Habakkuk could be improved. It could be made faster. It could be better armored. But the Admiralty refused. The war was turning in Britain's favor. The D-Day landings were a success. The U-boat threat was diminishing. Steel was becoming more available. The Royal Navy no longer needed the Habakkuk. Pike left the Combined Operations Headquarters in July 1944. He returned to his work as a scientist. He never spoke publicly about the Habakkuk again. He died in 1948 at the age of 52. His obituary mentioned his work on Arctic expeditions and chemical research. It made no mention of the ice carrier. The Habakkuk was largely forgotten in the years after the war. The wreck remained on the bottom of the Newfoundland Bay. Fishermen occasionally caught bits of pikeweed in their nets, but no one tried to salvage the ship. The project was dismissed as a curiosity, a strange footnote in World War II history. But in the 1990s, interest in the Habakkuk was rekindled. A team of marine archaeologists decided to explore the wreck. They used sonar to map the site. They sent a remotely operated vehicle, ROV, down to take photographs. The images showed that the hull was still intact. The pikeweed had not melted. It had been preserved by the cold water. The archaeologists were astonished. Pike had been right. Pikeweed was durable enough to last for decades. The discovery led to a reevaluation of the Habakkuk project. Military historians began to study the plans. They realized that the carrier had been a viable idea. It could have worked. If the U-boat had not sunk it, the Habakkuk might have played a role in the final years of the war. It could have protected convoys in the North Atlantic. It could have launched air strikes against German U-boat bases in Norway. It could have even been used to support the invasion of Japan. The Habakkuk was not a failure of engineering. It was a failure of timing. It was built too late, and it was destroyed too soon. The legacy of the Habakkuk lives on in other fields. Pikeweed has been used in Arctic construction. It has been used to build temporary roads and runways. It has even been tested as a material for building houses in cold climates. The idea of using ice as a construction material has inspired scientists to think differently about resource scarcity. In a world where steel and concrete are becoming more expensive, ice could be a viable alternative. The Habakkuk also taught a valuable lesson about innovation. Sometimes, the most unconventional ideas are the ones that have the greatest potential. Pike's ice carrier was mocked by many, but it was based on sound science. It was a bold attempt to solve a critical problem. The Habakkuk also offers a window into the mindset of Britain during World War II. It was a nation fighting for its survival. It was willing to try anything to win. The war forced Britain to innovate. It led to the development of radar, penicillin, and the jet engine. The Habakkuk was part of that tradition of innovation. It was a product of desperation, but it was also a product of ingenuity. It showed that even in the darkest of times, human creativity can shine through. Today, the Habakkuk is remembered as one of the most unusual weapons of World War II. It is featured in documentaries and books about unconventional warfare. It has even inspired science fiction writers. But for those who worked on it, the Habakkuk was more than a curiosity. It was a symbol of hope. It was a reminder that even when all seems lost, there is always a way forward. Pike may have never seen his ice carrier sail into battle, but he left behind a legacy that continues to inspire. The Habakkuk was a ship that couldn't melt, and in a way, its idea has also endured. It has melted into the collective consciousness of military history. It has become a reminder that sometimes the craziest ideas are the ones that matter most. As the years pass, the Habakkuk wreck will slowly deteriorate. The pikeweed will eventually melt. But the story of the ice carrier will live on. It will be told and retold. It will be studied and debated. It will be a testament to the power of human imagination. The Habakkuk was a failure in its time, but it was a success in the long run. It taught us that we should never dismiss an idea simply because it seems impossible. We should never stop asking what if, because in the end, it's the what ifs that change the world. The Habakkuk was more than a ship. It was a dream of a better way to fight a war, a dream of using nature's resources to protect humanity, a dream that, for a brief moment, seemed possible. And even though the dream ended in the icy waters of Newfoundland, it still has something to teach us. It teaches us that innovation is not about being perfect. It's about being brave. It's about being willing to try. And that, in the end, is the greatest lesson of all.